Thanks everyone for attending today. I'm looking forward to talking about really 25 years of Xerces in a way, but also hit some touch points of what we've done this year. I want to have full disclosure that I had a really hard time putting this webinar because we have such amazing staff who are doing so much work. The My goal had to be what do I present and what do I leave out. So there's a lot of projects that I won't be able to cover in 45 or 50 minutes, but I'm going to cover a variety of great projects that I think you'll be interested in. First, I want to thank Rachel and Amber, who are helping with this webinar. I like to do my thank yous right off the bat. Second, I want to thank our partners. So Xerces at its core is a partnership organization. We work with many thousands of people across North America and the world, including thousands of community scientists, thousands of farmers, a network of over 100 scientists from around the world, state, federal, and local agencies, dozens of companies, and dozens of private foundations. And especially want to give a shout out to our over 20,000 Xerces Society members and donors. Our members and donors make a huge difference. This is a critical time for nonprofits, not just Xerces. And so, if you're able to support Xerces or another of your favorite causes, it's important to do so. Only if you're able, right? But this is a trying time. People are seeing less funding. They're seeing a lot more work and a lot more challenges. I'll talk slightly about a little bit about that as we move forward. But please do give what you can to the issues that you really care about. Really important. I also want to thank Xerces staff. What I'm presenting today, I often feel a little awkward because I'm really presenting, I'm part of this, of course. I'm really presenting what our staff are doing. And this is a real difference from when I started. When I started, we had 3.5 staff. That was the year 2000. As Rachel said, I've been here 25 years. We now have 101 staff from all across the country. And it's startling how effective these people are, how committed, how intelligent, how thoughtful, and how effective. We also, and I'll briefly talk in our this webinar as well about our Xerces ambassadors. We now have 176 ambassadors across the country. These are amazing volunteers who are bringing the message of invertebrate conservation to tens of thousands of people a year, which I'll chat about. I just want to level set because why are we here? Well, I'm here because I love wildlife. I have since I was a kid, turning over rocks in the little local area in the city I grew up in. But for a lot of people, I think we need another reason than just the love of wildlife to lean in on conservation of insects and other invertebrates. And invertebrates are really at the heart of a healthy landscape. If you want to do wildlife conservation, whether you care about fish or birds or plants, you also have to think about insects because they're food for wildlife. They do pest control, of course, pollination, we often talk about, seed dispersal. They help clean our water. They help clean our and improve our soils. So these animals just, they're no doubt about how important they are. I give a whole talk kind of on their importance, but this will be it for today because I figure you're a knowledgeable audience. But unfortunately, these animals are also in decline. Really important paper in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences looked at studies from across the world and found where studied insect populations are declining at somewhere between 1 and 2% annually. it's a little hard to wrap your mind around. So a 2% annual decline is approximately a 30% decline over 20 years. This means less pollination. It means less food for wildlife. It means less of all of the services that these animals provide. And it's happening with a all pretty much every group studied, from butterflies to bees to beetles to aquatic insects like stoneflies and dragonflies. But we also know what's causing these issues. There's really three major issues, and then a lot of other issues colluding to lead to these insects decline. And this same paper, which is again in the Proceedings of the National Academy Sciences, called it a death by 1,000 cuts. But the biggest drivers are habitat loss and degradation, pesticide use, and climate change. But of course, we have many other drivers like invasive species, non-native insects, lights, and the list goes on there. But we also know the solutions. And that's what I think is really important to point out. We know what to do. We just need to crowdsource more people to do it. If we really hope to address biodiversity loss, especially when there's the overlay of climate change, we've got to restore and protect habitats across landscapes, from cities to wild areas to farms. And we need to act now. There's a lot that we can do individually. Individuals can do an amazing amount of work on this, from planting great habitats to turning off lights to giving up or avoiding pesticides. But Xerces works beyond just the individual, because we also need governments to step up. Federal governments for sure, but also local and state governments that can do a lot to help push good policies that help conservation, that help invertebrates, that help all wildlife, and that help ultimately us. So with all of that in mind, Xerces really is, all of our work is about behavior change, right? The key, I think, to Xerces' success so far and Xerces' success in the future is really good communication with the goal of behavior change. How do we get a broad cross section of people to care about these animals? Okay, that's great if they care about them, but then get them excited, give them the tools, give them the resources to actually take that next step. It's great for people to care about them, but we need that next step, and we need it as many people doing that, and as quickly as possible. So I think Xerces uses a holistic conservation approach. I've managed Xerces and helped it grow, as I said, from less than 4 staff to 100 staff. And I set it up. I'm a researcher. I'm a scientist, and so I wanted everything at Xerces to be underpinned with science. So we work with researchers on applied science and crowdsource community science data. And then we use that science to educate the public, engage them, and then provide conservation assistance to actually help these animals. And we also use it for our advocacy and policy efforts for these species. Kind of the whole pipeline of conservation is what I think. So today, I'm going to go through a number of strategies. So Xerces has a strategic plan, and it's got 4 main strategies with a lot of sub-strategies. I'm going to look at each strategy and what we've done this year and what we've done in the last 25 years to help the animals that we're in charge of helping. And the first is to build knowledge through science. As I said, we're a science-based organization, and I really don't believe we can do this work without first understanding what these animals need. So, where do they live? What's their life history? What are the threats? And what are the management needs? So we work with academic researchers to actually take a lot of their research and apply it, but we also work with academic researchers and public agencies and private landowners on applied research projects. And I'm going to only be able to talk about a couple of these moving forward. As I said, I'm not going to get to everything, but I'd say some of the most important work we do are species status assessments. We've got a 1.4 million invertebrates out there. Without having some grounding in what's going on with different groups and with individual species, it's very hard to take action for them. So Xerces has done status assessments for all of the bumblebee species of the America, North America, South America, and Central America. We've done assessments for all the fireflies of the US and Canada. We've done assessments for freshwater mussels. Again, throughout all of this, I want to make sure that it's not just Xerces. We work with partners. I would just be naming names the whole time if I had to name everybody involved in every project. But please know that there are many Xerces staff and many partners involved in all this. And we've been recently working on butterflies and bees. And I want to do a little bit deeper dive into kind of how some of these assessments work, and how long they take and how much information is needed for them. So we recently published a paper in the peer-reviewed journal Science, as well as put out this State of the Butterflies report. And this actually was initiated in 2019. I was giving a seminar series. I'd invited researchers and conservationists to speak. And I was at lunch with a great colleague from Washington State University, Cheryl Schultz. And I said to her, we have State of the birds. We understand what's going on with them. Can we possibly do State of the butterflies? She helped Xerces uh, pull together the concept and move this forward. And this is where these partners come in. We work with federal and state agencies and academics. And the first step was to look at how much data is out there. Sometimes there's a lot of potential information that isn't all in one place. And that was the first step of this we looked at 35 different programs that monitored butterflies. We then analyzed over almost 77,000 surveys with 12.6 million individual butterflies. It's a lot of work to find that information and to make sense of it. And so we use that data to ask, how is total abundance of butterflies changing? And what can we tell about what is going on with individual species? And what we found was, as with many of our assessments, is not good. We are seeing major declines in butterflies across North America, across the United States anyway, is where we limited the data to. And we've gone from in 2005 butterflies to 4 butterflies on the landscape. Again, butterflies are important for a whole variety of things, and we have 22% less of them than we did in 2000. But we didn't want to stop with a paper that talked about the problem. We wanted, as Xerces, as I've said, we want to affect change. And to do that, we needed more information. So we put together this roadmap for butterfly conservation that provides land managers, decision makers, just interested conservationists with information that will help them do conservation if they're interested in butterflies. So, what butterflies are declining in your area, what butterflies, there were some butterflies that are increasing. That's the start. And then what should we do? There's a lot more than just these 2 slides in this report. But what are the calls to action? What do we do in natural areas? What do we do in cities? What do we do on farms? How can we increase host plants in pollinator plantings, for instance? to support these animals? How do we minimize pesticide use? We're right now in the midst of a several year long initiative also for the state of the bees. There are actually about more than 4 times as many bees in North America than there are butterflies. So it's a big and challenging effort. But similarly, we're looking to understand species distribution, life history, extinction risk, identifying and addressing threats, and then developing management guidance. I've mentioned pesticides a couple times. We do a lot of work. Our pesticide reduction team really does a lot of work on all levels, whether it's research, policy, on the ground, conservation. And we do studies that are kind of almost snapshots of what is going on in different landscapes, which have really helped us move conservation forward. For instance, what residue levels and combinations of pesticides are we seeing in the environment? We've done this with milkweeds in California. We've looked at retail nurseries. We've got a study coming out or just came out on residential treatment of landscapes for mosquitoes. But today I want to just do a few slides on a study that also just came out on pesticide contamination of butterfly host plants, since we were connecting that report that we did to the work that we're doing. And so we started smaller. We just worked in 2 cities, Sacramento, California, and Albuquerque. Often we do that to get a sense of what's going on, how to do the sampling, what to do. And we sampled host plants from parks and private gardens near parks throughout those 2 cities. Unfortunately, first, the leaves were then screened for 94 pesticide compounds. Unfortunately, like with many of our other studies, we found a lot of contamination. 93% of the plants we sampled were contaminated with pesticides. We found 47 different compounds, and the median level, so the median level for each plant was 3 pesticides in the plant, but some plants contained up to 18 pesticides per plant. So it's depressing to see this, but this allows us to have the conversations we need to have with park managers, not just in Albuquerque and Sacramento, who are very interested in working more with us to both understand this and change this dynamic, but parks across the country, so that we can do a better job of protecting these animals from poisons that will harm and kill them. We also use something called community science. Sometimes people call it citizen science, to gather information that we would not be able to gather otherwise. Again, I've mentioned this once, there are 1.4 million species of invertebrates that we've identified, maybe many more that are unidentified, and they're everywhere. How do you study them? It's difficult, and you can't just study. All of the academics in the world and all of Xerces staff could not study these, holistically study these animals. So what we do is crowdsource volunteers who are willing to go out and get us important data, which helps us do our conservation. The side benefit of that is many of these people become some of our best advocates, whether going to a city council meeting to talk about pesticides or organizing plantings at their local parks. These people not only give us information, but become amazing volunteers for these animals. So, we've got 4 major community science projects, and I'm actually not going to touch on all of them today, really. Our Firefly Atlas, our milkweed monarch and milkweed mapper, and our Western monarch count. Really important. Check those out online. You can get engaged. But today I thought I would do a little deeper dive into our Bumblebee Atlas and how it started and what we're able to do with it. So more than a decade ago, we started getting data on decline in bumblebees. But mainly it was these four species: Western bumblebee, Franklin's bumblebee, yellow-banded bumblebee, and rusty patch. Um, and there was some information on decline, but we really lacked the information to really understand the scope and scale of decline. And we were looking at a way, how can we find the information we need? And this is where people come in. Serena Jepson runs our endangered species program, and she had an idea that could we get people to send photos to us, um, from out in areas throughout landscapes, and see if we can document where we're finding these four rare species. So it was fun. We created these wanted posters, which I don't know, I like a lot. They went up in universities and colleges, community colleges, other schools, agencies, and people stepped up and started taking pictures. And soon we were overwhelmed because people were sending these via email. It was going to break soon. So that's when Sarita and another staff person, Rich Hatfield, stepped in to get us a platform that we could actually crowdsource this data in a much easier way to manage. And that's when we launched Bumblebee Watch with, as you can see, a variety of partners. And what this allowed people to do is take a picture, they could upload that picture to the Bumblebee Watch site, try to identify it or not. But we have experts and Xerces staff that make sure they check the identifications, and make sure all those identifications are correct. And this has been huge. We've had over 20 quarter million observations and over 50,000 registered users. But then we started to see another problem. We were seeing, not a problem, I guess, but a challenge to overcome. We were getting great data, but that data was really skewed to populated areas, right? The towns, cities, roadsides, things like that. How do we get data from across landscapes? And that's again where Rich Hatfield and Serena Jepson, and others came up with this idea of our Bumblebee Atlas. Um, they came up with the idea of putting a grid cell across different landscapes, having people adopt a grid cell, do time surveys. You capture, instead of taking the bee on the flower, you capture, chill, and photograph, and then let them go. It really does not harm the bumblebees. You upload the photos, and the dynamic totally changed. This is the three-state area of Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. This was our first attempt at the Bumblebee Atlas, and it was a resounding success because, unlike with Bumblebee Watch, which is great, please don't get me wrong, the data we get is very useful and still very useful if you want to go out and collect Bumblebee data in your yard and put it on Bumblebee Watch. But this allowed us to get the presence data, where are these animals, but the absence data, which is vital for making conservation decisions. Also, we got habitat preference, and threats from the Bumblebee Atlas. And it's been really meaningful. This is a peer-reviewed paper that used our Bumblebee Atlas data. And I just pulled out a quote from this. The Pacific Northwest Bumblebee Atlas set the standard for community science programs, the in-depth training, robust quality control, and purposeful sampling design with repeated surveys allowed incorporation of the data into the occupancy analysis of this is the Western bumblebee. And they also talked about how it could be a framework for managing these landscapes. And now we've been able to move to that as well. So recently we worked with state and federal agencies to produce this report, which identifies priority areas for conservation of eight bumblebee species of conservation concern in Washington. We're currently working on a similar report that includes bumblebees as well as butterflies in Oregon. and we'll be working on a bumblebee report for California. So that's the next step. And meanwhile, the Bumblebee Atlas has grown from just the Pacific Northwest to working in 20 states. We've got over 2,000 participants and over 132,000 observations. So a whole team of staff working on this that are crowdsourcing conservation. So strategy number 2 is that building a movement. As I said, we've got to get people engaged, but it's not just about engagement, it's about action. How do we bring people to the table and then get them the information they need to make change and inspire them to do it? And we start that with our ambassador program. This is a program that is the bright idea of Rachel, who is helping put on this podcast. She came to her supervisor and they came to me and said, we've got an idea about training volunteers that will go out and reach people across the country. I thought it was a great idea. I thought it would seem to work well, but it's worked better than my wildest imagination. We now have nearly 175 of these incredible volunteers who give their time freely, who are incredibly knowledgeable, who they also go through trainings in 38 states. And these amazing people reached over 50,000 people. These amazing ambassadors reached over 50,000 people this year. I could not have imagined this, Rachel, when you pitched this idea some years ago that we'd be here. I'd be smiling this much. Our staff also lean in and do a lot of education and outreach, and a lot of that comes in the form of training people. So we get people inspired and then train them on how to do insect and invertebrate conservation. Land managers, farmers, park staff. Our staff have reached an additional 27,000 people on top of the ambassadors reaching 50. That's a huge number to actually reach, you know, actually talk to that many people. We then learned early on, though, that even the outreach and education and the training only goes so far. We found out that conservation planning and direct assistance was something we needed to do. And this one-on-one assistance really leads to successful conservation, whether it's habitat design, help with restoration, training on how to minimize pesticide use, how to identify butterflies, beetles, bumblebees. This one-on-one training tips people over the edge in a good way. They want to do these projects, but they might have questions, they might be uncertain, and we can help address that uncertainty. We do a lot of this with a variety of land managers through a variety of publications as well, from protecting fireflies from pesticides and firefly-friendly lighting, mussel-friendly restoration, helping nurseries avoid pesticides, to management plans, conservation assessments, the list goes on. This is really important to provide that extra step for people, so you really do have a roadmap for conservation. We also work regularly with a variety of agencies, and in some cases work with them very closely. We have a number of what are called Natural Resource Conservation Service partner biologists. The NRCS is part of the USDA, and we're embedded with this agency so that we can reach their staff directly and reach the farmers that they support. We have 20 partner biologist positions working in NRCS offices across the country, and they do a lot. In 2025, these staff provided conservation support to over 578 projects and wrote 142 farm-specific NRCS conservation plans. Again, taking that outreach and education, getting people excited, but helping them to make change. And it's not just pollinators. As you know, we work on a variety of taxa. Freshwater mussels are an important animal in streams and rivers throughout this country, cleaning water. They provide habitat for fish. They're really, really cool as well. And our research, our assessments, our surveys have led to us being able to work with a whole bunch of conservation entities to bring conservation attention to these animals. What we sometimes saw is that there was so little knowledge of these animals. Restorationists would be doing projects and they would not even know that these animals were in the streams, and they would dewater or tear up a stream to start to restore it or remove a dam, and they would actually kill freshwater mussels. Some of these freshwater mussels can grow to 50 to 70 to 80 years old. And so if we're killing these mussel beds, it can take decades to rebuild them. And they're incredible, important ecosystem engineers. Some people call them the coral reefs of our fresh waters. This year alone, led by Emily Blevins, who runs our freshwater mussel program, we protected and rescued more than 45,000 freshwater mussels from rivers in Oregon and Washington, working with a variety of entities. And the dynamic is changing. We're being approached to help develop projects with freshwater mussels in mind, which I would say even 5 to 8 years ago, we were having to go find those projects and let people know about freshwater mussels. It's really neat to see the change. We also do a lot in advancing policy. I mentioned that we can do a lot as individuals, and we should step up. But we can't do this alone. We need to advance policies that protect these animals. And we do a variety of policy work, from pesticide use reduction and reform to protecting, declining species and protecting biodiversity, to promoting habitat, sustainable agriculture, incentives to do this work, as well as really working with state level wildlife management agencies and trying to find information and funding for them. Unfortunately, this has not been a great year for federal policy. We, for the most part, try to be a proactive organization. We see the definite benefit of reaction and of pushing back, and at times you have to do that. But being a smallish organization, we've tried to focus on where we could do something positive. Again, the groups that are pushing back on bad policies are wonderful. It was just not as much Xerces in Xerces' portfolio. But this last year, we've seen such significant threats to federal policies, cuts in federal program, cuts in funding sources. We've lost so many of our partners who were doing great work at federal agencies. So a lot of our federal response this year is pushing back, is working with coalition partners to fight changes to the Endangered Species Act, to fight for our roadless areas, to fight rollbacks for pesticide protections. But we also lean in on unique issues, issues unique to Xerces anyway. For example, Xerces organized a science letter opposing funding and staffing cuts for the National Native Bee Lab. This bee lab has oodles of information, has really been important for understanding bees and important for us for understanding bee conservation. We gathered over 460 signatures from scientists opposing the cuts to the National Bee Lab. And to date, I can say that Bee Lab is still open. We're hopeful that it will be at the end of this year and at the end of the decade as well. But we've always done work at the local and state level. And I would contend we're doing even more work at the local and state level because we really do see states, cities, counties stepping up to do everything from pesticides, outside lighting, pollinator protection. Um, and so we're able to work with these communities and work with local community members to make change locally and on a state basis. And this year, Xerces supported over 20 state level bills in the US, just one touch point, which is amazing. We helped again with a coalition pass a Connecticut bill prohibiting the use of neonicotinoids on turf grass. This is eliminating neonicotinoid use from up to 300,000 acres. Really meaningful stuff going on at the sub-national level. And we want to be there to help make the most of it. I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive into our Insects as Wildlife campaign because we work with agencies across the country, state agencies, and that's become more important over the last year. And state agencies are vital for wildlife conservation. The 50 state wildlife agencies manage more than 450 million acres. I put this picture of a grizzly bear for a purpose because I talked about how we can't support wildlife conservation generally without thinking about invertebrates. And grizzly bears, brown bears are obligate to insects. People go, what? Grizzly bears eat salmon that are coming back from the ocean. Those salmon, which are born in streams, would never even make it to the ocean without a rich diet of invertebrates, insects and other invertebrates. It's how they make it downstream, and then they come up and grizzly bears eat them. The second major food source are berries, and berries that grizzlies eat are pollinated by native bees. So these animals really do rely on insects, and that's why state agencies should remember that and remember that insects and other invertebrates need to be part of the dialogue. And these state agencies often lead the monitoring efforts, recovery of imperiled species, and can prevent species from sliding towards extinction before they do, if we can catch them early. Unfortunately, there are some states across the United States that have no authority to protect insects. Insects are not considered wildlife. In Oregon, Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, Tennessee, and North Carolina, insects are not considered wildlife. These agencies use their state code, and that state code almost always these management agencies work under has a definition of wildlife, and in these states, insects are not defined as wildlife. In other states, there's unclear authority. In other states, there's lack of funding, even if they do have authority. So it's really important to help states understand the importance of these animals, get authority to work on them, and then work with them to realize those gains. Xerces started this Insects and Wildlife campaign a number of years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago. It's a group effort between our declining species group as well as our policy group. And as with anything else, we have a lot of partners, but we've had great initial success. In 2024, Colorado, this new Colorado law gave Parks and Wildlife, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Authority, to study and conserve invertebrates and provided funding to hire 6 staff people to focus on pollinators. In 2025, New Mexico's legislature passed the Wildlife Reform Act. It did a lot of things, including changing the name of the agency from the Game and Fish Department to the Fish and Wildlife Department. and it provided the agency authority to manage and conserve insects there. We worked with a broad coalition of groups, the New Mexico's Wildlife Reform Coalition, to make that happen. We're currently working in Pennsylvania to get the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources Authority. We've been working in Nevada. Unfortunately, the legislative session ended, and we will take that up in the next legislative session. And we're looking and building resources in the other states to move this forward. But it's a really important but successful campaign that we've been able to do. As I said, we also help agencies that do have authority, and in that realm, our staff provided information to add invertebrates as species of greatest conservation need to 27 state wildlife action plans. State wildlife action plans are the plans that guide the conservation of declining species. You know, if you're on listed under there, you can get funding, you can get time, you can get resources. So this is another really important action. But at the end of the day, all of that, whether it's the research, whether it's community science, whether it's outreach and education or conservation assistance or policy, the goal is to expand and improve habitat. And that's what we do very well. At the end of those processes, we are helping these landscapes to support biodiversity. And it's not just wild landscapes, those are important and they're very much hubs of biodiversity. We have to protect them, and Xerces works on that. But human altered environments as well, in agriculture, in urban areas, on roadsides. And we focus on what are called nature-based climate solutions. Nature-based solutions, sometimes called natural solutions, involve restoring, better managing, and better managing ecosystems to remove carbon. And many people think of planting trees under this, right? That's a nature-based climate solution. But protecting trees is just or more as important than planting trees. And this nature-based climate solutions can be done in any habitat, in ag, in towns and cities, on roadsides, in forests. And it's really, really important. One study found that nature-based climate solutions can provide about 20%, a fifth of the carbon capture we need to keep to under 2 degrees Celsius. And it's much less expensive than some of the technological fixes. So I'm not saying we replace any of the work we're doing on climate change with nature-based climate solutions. What I'm saying is it should be one important piece. And beyond the carbon storage, it provides for resilient ecosystems, right? It provides for biodiversity, which I'll chat about. And insects can be a really powerful tool for implementing nature-based solutions. I have found over my tenure that people respond to pollinators, to butterflies, to other insect groups in a tangible way that maybe nature-based solutions doesn't grab them as much, right? And projects for insects can be done at multiple, even smaller scales in a variety of habitats. And this restoration works for insects in timescales of years, not decades, so people see the difference in shorter amounts of time. And the key to this, which is interesting, is as we move forward, Xerces has gotten a lot more plant ecologists and plant people and restoration ecologists, because I like to say that plants and insects are the fabric of the planet. We need them both to support everything else. And we need to focus on protecting, restoring, augmenting, with a focus on drought adaptive native plant systems. And we need to promote diversity. Diversity of plants supports a diversity of insects, which in turn support a diversity of wildlife. Insect diversity is needed to support and maintain all those ecosystem functions I've been talking about. This biodiversity buffers the impacts of climate change by providing an array of microclimates which serve as important refuge for insects in maybe heat waves or other extreme weather events. And maintaining more insects buffers against the loss of both those insect communities and the plants where they live. So it is key that we get that native plant, climate adaptive, diverse habitats out there. And we do this on a big scale. We work with diverse audiences across landscapes, from farms to business parks, from roadsides to urban community gardens, and beyond. And it's a major focus of our work. Um, we often, I think some people see us from the farm lens, and we do a lot of work on farms. If we are going to protect biodiversity, farms have to be part of the solution because they're such a large part of the landscape. And yes, farms are one of the big problems that we have, but they're also one of the solutions. We've got many farmers who are willing to step up and do the right thing. And our Living Farm project works directly with farmers and a variety of food companies to improve these farms. With a focus on nature-based climate solutions. And I just have a Western map here because I was able to pull that, but we've done over 1,000 pollinator and beneficial insect habitats in the Western US through our Xerces agricultural partnerships. These include 125 miles of flowering hedgerows throughout the Western United States. But beyond the Western United States, working with NRCS in partnership and others, it has led to 2.1 million acres of pollinator habitat restored and managed on ag lands. And these can be huge projects, they can be small projects, they can be medium-sized projects. Some of them are very large. This is a project we did a few years ago in the San Joaquin Valley of California. This is almonds. You can see these almond landscapes are often devoid of habitat. We worked with this farmer to put in a hedgerow that's over a mile long. In places, it's over 50 feet wide. You can see that arrow, it's pointing at a little truck. And this adds both a lot of habitat for these animals as well as connectivity across these landscapes. And the idea is to go from this to this, from this to this, and from this to this. That's almonds, but we do projects across the United States in a whole variety of different crops. I could give you another half an hour of just a photo ride, but I'll just show you a few other of our habitat projects, making a big difference for biodiversity on farms. But we don't just stick with farms. We work in natural areas. I really believe that natural areas are the key to biodiversity conservation. We need to work on all other landscapes, but we have to protect what remains on farms. And unfortunately, or protect what remains on our, especially our public natural areas. And unfortunately, state and federal agencies sometimes do projects that have big impacts. And one type of project they do is large scale spraying for control of native grasshoppers and Mormon crickets across public rangelands in the West. Generally, around average, about 500,000 acres are sprayed with highly toxic insecticides that don't just kill grasshoppers, that kill aquatic insects and pollinators. We've been focusing on this since I started this program in 2006. We were able to hire staff more recently and make it into a real program and do much more than what we did at the start. But this program involves advocacy, it involves policy, it involves outreach and education. And we've seen this huge shift Um, the research and dialogue regarding grasshopper management has shifted to be more prevention based and less just spray because we're seeing grasshoppers. And this year, federal land management agencies prohibited insecticide sprays across about 10 million acres of western grasslands. This is really, really meaningful. And our staff person, Shannon, who has managed this program, deserves big kudos for helping with, again, a broad coalition and a lot of other people at Xerces with helping make this happen. We also work in towns and cities. That number's slightly wrong. We actually, I believe, have 465 B City USA town, city, and campus affiliates. And these communities are stepping up in a meaningful way. We manage this effort, we provide resources. It's again a bit of like crowdsourcing. And then these cities take it from cities, towns, and campuses take it from there. Um, it just boggles my mind since the inception of Bee City USA. There have been over 8,000 pollinator habitat projects done. Cities have engaged over 2.5 million people with a conservation message. And the over 92% of affiliates that have reported talked about minimizing pesticide use, some of them eliminating all pesticide use in cities or on campuses, going to organic practices, and just halting cosmetic applications. It's really cool. And then the last thing I want to point out is our Habitat Kit program. We provide climate smart native pollinator plants to project partners who are willing to provide the time, labor, and land to develop habitats. These are throughout cities, towns, rural areas. This has been a huge, huge win for biodiversity. And we started this program in 2019. We've done over 2,400 projects and given away over 500,000 plants. And in 2025 alone, we have 500 projects that we've added. You can see that we're only in certain geographies. We hope to do more. Each one of these takes a lot of work, takes a lot of funding to make happen, but we see this as a really meaningful way to get plants to people that will take care of them, and in some cases to people that haven't done this before and become great, great spokespeople for pollinator and other beneficial insect conservation. So at the end of the day, in my tenure, we have protected and restored over 4 million acres and improved management on over tens of millions of acres more. And I like to think about each of these habitats and what we've gained, right? Um, the amount of biodiversity that we have been able to maintain and improve across these landscapes is a bit mind boggling when you think about the number of insects that live in these habitats. Because the cool thing about this, in just the last couple slides, is that these projects work. We know when we do restoration and protection and limit pesticide use, we see an immediate increase in the abundance, that's the number of these animals, as well as diversity. This can work on big scales. It can also work on small scales. I'll just talk about my yard. I moved into my house about 10 years ago. It was all non-natives, pretty much all grass with some non-natives. We, of course, have done a lot of work to add natives and add habitat. We didn't take out all of the non-natives. There's a few beautiful hybrid tea roses that we love and some other plants that were actually pollinator plants that were non-natives, but we leaned in on climate adapted native plants. First year I was here, these aren't statistically valid surveys, but I looked around and I found, I think it was 11 insect species in my yard. After 10 years, I looked around this year, over several different days over the season and found well over 100 insect species. And the amount of insects buzzing around my yard is increased exponentially, which means that I've got more birds, I've got more other animals. It's amazing. If you do this work, these animals will respond in a positive way. So, just one final thought. We're living in difficult political, ecological, economic times. And at least for me, sometimes that can feel insurmountable. But what I see all the time in my job is that the hope derived from invertebrate conservation really shouldn't be underestimated. The simple act of restoring habitat, seeing firsthand these animals return to sites that they were no longer at, or protecting habitat and seeing that those animals are going to remain there, really is, in a way, an act of rebellion against what's going on. And we're hearing from people firsthand how meaningful these acts truly are. So I want to thank everybody out there who's doing this work. I want to thank everybody that supports Xerces or supports other actions in the conservation realm. We need everybody working together, and we can make a difference. And I think I want to go back to what everything Xerces has done has been made possible by our donors, our partners, and hundreds, thousands of people across landscapes who are tens of thousands, millions who are stepping up to make a difference. And then I just end with this slide because I love this picture of this weevil. It just makes me smile. And so being an invertebrate championing will make insects jump with joy. And with that, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I think we've got some time for questions, and I'm happy to take them. I'm going to ask Rachel and or Amber, should I exit out of the slides so that people can see me on the screen?
That is completely up to you. It's a good question. No one's asked us that before. But yeah, you're welcome to if you would like to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind people seeing who they're talking to. So, although I think that last image is awfully wonderful. So, pretty cool little weevil.
I love that picture. It's great. Yeah, we're going to dive right into questions. And as a reminder, please use that Q&A feature. So Vicky, this is a long one. It's a really good one. With so many threats reducing the functioning of ecosystems nationally and globally, is Xerces collaborating with other NGOs, those focused on birds and other charismatic species, to amplify your impact? Insects are the little things that run the world, and the public does not appreciate this, unfortunately. Does leveraging invertebrate conservation under the umbrella of conserving vertebrate charismatic species work?
Yes, yes, and yes. We work with a lot of groups, the American Bird Conservancy, National Wildlife Federation, as well as I mentioned, state agencies that mostly work on vertebrates, and bringing the message that if you want birds, if you want fish, if you want wildlife, we need insects, and leveraging that with groups that are focusing on other taxa is really key because I of course am doing this. I love these small animals. I think they're important in their own right. Uh, but much of what we're doing is really providing the as you talked about, providing the habitat, providing the underpinning of life to support these other animals. So yes, it's meaningful. And yes, if you work with a local bird organization or a local fishing organization or any other local organization, and we can come in and talk about the importance of what they're trying to do and how to integrate insects and other invertebrates into that, we're always happy to lean in on that. So great question. We need all of us stepping up and all of us working together. And by the way, I'm not a purist. I love all wildlife, beaver to moose, lizards to, insects. So just give me wildlife and I'm happy.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, partnerships are so important. Playing off of that question, or building off of that question, I should say, Karen would like to know, is Xerces connected with any international organizations?
Yes, we do actually, although we don't have any staffing internationally, we have always worked with partners who actually, in many cases, look to us to as a kind of model for what they might want to do in a different country. So, a few examples of that are Invertebrates Australia. This is a newer group that kind of was founded partially on the idea, could we have a Xerces Society in Australia? I'm a science advisor, and they're small yet, but they're doing really, really meaningful work. We work with other groups like Butterfly Conservation, which is in Europe. Um, and we work with other wildlife groups like the Canadian sorry, the Canadian Wildlife Federation, who we do work with, who does focus some on pollinators, but a lot on bigger mammals, and then some big entities like the International Union for Conservation of Nature. We've worked with a lot. These are the folks that do assessments across the world, and we have helped come up with really good ways to do assessments for invertebrates and actually led many of those efforts. So yes, we don't have staff there, but I think the work we have done in partnership has really led to some good new conservation efforts in other parts of the world.
Thank you, Scott. Another question came in from Michael, which I appreciate. We talk about iNaturalist a lot as a great community science program in a way that people can log really any wildlife or plants that they see. But they're specifically asking, do your community science bee projects draw on iNaturalist data as well as data from your own bee apps? If so, how has iNaturalist data helped?
iNaturalist data is so amazingly important. The way that they've set that up to crowdsource data for so many different animals, there's really nothing like it. And so yes, we actually work with them. We get the data that they have. The reason that we do set up consistent platforms for that are separate from iNaturalist often is that iNaturalist is similar to Bumblebee Watch in that people take a picture wherever they are. And our newer platforms, our Firefly Atlas and our Bumblebee Atlas efforts are targeting trying to get data from across entire landscapes. But yes, iNaturalist is an amazing tool, and we certainly partner with them and use that really important information on a variety, not just our bumblebees, but fireflies, and it's just an important tool for plants. It's I can't talk highly enough about iNaturalist.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, I use it all the time myself. All right, switching gears here. Someone wants to know, when you're working to reach folks who may not have invertebrate conservation as a priority, where do you start? What are some strategies you use in encouraging people to consider conservation perspectives?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think it's the conversations we have. So to me, the idea of not just launching in to people who may be not understanding fully or maybe even skeptical, you can sort of meet them where they are and then try to understand what the lever points for them might be. It might be birds. Maybe they have birds in their backyard and they do the Christmas counts with their kids in the backyard. You can talk to them about, well, 96% of songbirds, including those ones in your backyard, need insects. So if you want birds in your backyard, maybe it's talking to somebody who fishes who doesn't exactly realize how much fish rely on insects. Maybe it's a gardener who kind of believes that they can't just go messy enough for pollinators, and I see those pollinator gardens, and they're messy, and I can't give up some of my perfect plants that I have. We can talk to them about taking part of their yard and starting to think about how do remove pesticides? How do you put in habitat within the structure of the beautiful landscape that you find beautiful? So I think it's being open to and not being too blunt and having a one dialogue that we would have. And I've done this for a long time, but Rachel, I don't know if you have anything to add as somebody who manages our Xerces ambassadors, because they talk to a lot of people every year. So if I missed anything, please let us all know.
No, I think your suggestions were really good.
Okay, great. The nice thing about Xerces, before we go to the next question, is there are so many incredible people who I've been doing this a long time, but I still learn all the time from people. And where I think what's interesting is if I can continue to learn, we can help others learn too. So,
Definitely. Yeah, like I feel like this year especially, it's been all about meeting people where they're at. I think that is something that's really powerful, meeting them where they're at and making the topic relevant to them. And that's what I love about Xerces is there is so much that we offer that people can do, and there's really something for everybody. So having that flexibility, it kind of breaks down a lot of barriers to getting involved in conservation.
yeah, and I do want to. That's a great point, and I want to make sure that people know. You don't even need a habitat to work on, right? There are so many things can do. Become a community scientist. Get more active in trying to maintain our programs at the federal level. Push your park service to use less pesticides. Think about your climate change uh, greenhouse gas emissions from, do I need to do that travel? Can I minimize things like eating meat every day? Can I ride my bike? Everybody has a role to play no matter what. And even a little bit is the start. And with gardening, we see people that I've seen over the years where people are, I don't know, I'm going to plant this little habitat and I'm still not sure. And then 5 years later, I see that 3/4 of their lawn is gone and it's all habitat. So if we can get people to start, sometimes that can be the lever that pushes them much farther down the road.
Definitely. Well, we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about pesticides.
Okay.
We have an awesome pesticide reduction program. So, this first question is about big box retailers. Margaret wants to know, well, they said that they're always shocked to see how many pesticides these big box retailers carry for homeowners. Is there a plan to educate them, or better yet, educate the homeowners?
Yes. Well, and I think it's educating both. So I think your question really catches at an important point. If we can get enough people to go into, whether it's a big box nursery or even small nurseries that sell pesticides, and not go in and shout at them, but go in and talk to them and say, this is I buy here and I'm a shopper and this is really important to me. The more people we can get to do that, the more we can change retailers in how they are either stocking products or which I didn't get to go into, or selling plants that are toxic. So just, and it's an aside, but not an aside. we've done studies looking not just at big box stores, but looking at retail sales of pollinator plants and found that many of them have pesticide residues that could harm insects. In one study, we found that about a third of the milkweed you would buy at the retailers, and most of it was listed as pollinator friendly, actually had residues that could actually either kill or greatly harm a monarch that would land and lay its eggs on there. So we need a lot more work in this arena, and a lot more education, and that's a big part of what we do through our Bee City USA efforts, getting cities to take that message and get it even to a broader audience through our ambassadors who talk about pesticides, to doing training for nurseries. We had a lot of nurseries after we did that study who were actually shocked that that there were pesticides in the plants they were selling and want to know how can we grow these plants without that. And we're leaning in on that. We're doing trainings. Um, and we also have a program, and you can go to our, our nursery program, kind of give you a guide on how to talk to your native plant or other nurseries about your concerns and ask them what pesticides they're using and let them know Xerces has resources that can help them minimize this. So, yes, and we have a new program that we're initiating this year to try to focus actually on HOAs. Many HOAs have, I think, their covenants or guidelines about having lawns and yards a certain way. And our goal is to work with folks who live within those HOAs to try to help to change that. Because we get a lot of places like that, that in a way you're promoting pesticides by saying that you have to have a lawn a certain way and it has to be manicured like that. So yes, we do. That is a huge thread throughout pretty much all of our work. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. And thank you, Rachel, for putting those resources in the chat there. You just beat me to it. Continuing with the residential pesticide application, but switching to mosquitoes, I'm going to try and combine a couple questions here. Robert says that they see a lot of billboards for residential mosquito sprayers, and they know that those company reps tell people that their sprays don't necessarily hurt insect larvae. They're skeptical on whether that's true or not. And so wondering how to educate people in communities about the use of those residential mosquito sprays and how safe they are. And then also, do you have any suggestions regarding how to educate local governments on perhaps reasons why to discontinue their mosquito spraying program throughout neighborhoods at large?
Yeah. Great question. I wasn't able to talk about the study we did, which just came out in a peer-reviewed journal. And that study found that it is not true that these mosquito spray operations that are fogging in yards are not harming pollinators and other insects. They certainly are. They say it's an ultra low volume fog. Sure, it is. And it may not be quite as bad as, a heavy dose, but you're still dosing everything that's in the landscape. And we know that that it also spreads beyond the yards. Our study showed that it harms insects within the yards, but also that these pesticides are spraying to the neighbors or spreading to the neighbors. So two things here. These pesticides are toxic. If you're targeting an insect like a mosquito, you are harming other insects. You just are. And the second point is that you're actually not helping to solve the mosquito problem at all. Spraying adulticides yard by yard doesn't work. If you've got a neighbor who has standing water, you just will have those mosquitoes the next night. It does not. It literally is not helpful. These are neurotoxins as well. So if you've got your kids and dogs out in this landscape, we're talking about pollinators and other insects here. This is not good for their long-term health for sure. So we just had done that study, and that's going to be the basis of new resources with talking points that you'll be able to use. That's a few months out, but check back to our pesticide reduction team um, pages, and maybe in a few months pop a email to one of the folks on that team, because we should have those resources coming out that kind of take the research and package it in a way that you could use it as outreach and education. We do also work to get municipalities to minimize the spraying that they do for mosquitoes. We always want to be thoughtful. There are mosquito-borne diseases that can harm people, right? And we need to be sort of thoughtful about how we are messaging this, and ensuring that, as many people as protected as possible. But what's interesting is the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, um, recommends that the first line of defense for mosquito-borne disease is yourself. It's having sure that you got screens on your house, wearing long pants and long shirts, or using, and it doesn't have to be the highly toxic stuff, but using some mosquito repellent. And number two is outreach and education. These mosquitoes live in small water bodies that are often inadvertently left in yards. So going, so much better than spraying an individual yard is going to a whole community and educating people and trying to get people to get rid of water sources. The third is to, if you need to treat, you treat larvae with what's called BTI, which is an organic pesticide that kills aquatic flies. It still kills all aquatic flies, so it does have an impact, but it doesn't kill the flying insects. And then the last resort is to spray certain zones if you've got a big outbreak of a disease that is affecting people. And we are working with several municipalities to show how they do it. And one is the city of Boulder, which barely uses any larvicide and doesn't use any adulticide and has fewer disease issues and mosquito issues than surrounding communities, because they're using that holistic approach. So check out our website. We've got a lot of stuff for municipalities. We will soon have more for thinking about the landowner issue. So thanks. That's a great question. And I guess I should have chose that little case study rather than the host plant one, but I had to. We'd be here all day if I went through all of our work. So.
That's quite all right, Scott. Thank you. And thank you again, Rachel, for providing those resources. So yeah, everyone stay tuned. More to come. All right, a couple more questions here. We have time for just a few more. Marie is wondering, does Xerces offer any education on distinguishing between bees and wasps, specifically so that not all stings are blamed on bees?
That's actually a good point. I don't know if we have anything that's specific like that. And as you point out, almost, I would say, maybe I can't say almost all stings, but I would say a majority of stings that people think are bees are yellow jackets. And, the reason is that honeybees um, don't usually sting you if you're around the flowers unless you grab them or squish them or something like that. Whereas yellow jackets are predators, and they're quite aggressive if you mess with them. So I think that would actually be I know we have some resources. How available they are, And I love questions like this because I'm going to talk to my outreach and education team to see if what we have and whether it would make sense to have more of those.
Sounds good, Scott. I think your whole team is here, either in the audience or Amber and I. All right. Well, we are going to end on this last question from Michael. In fighting light pollution, focusing on fireflies is very helpful, but they're wondering if we can capitalize on people's love of pollinators to raise the profile of night flying moths. Or are they not visually attractive enough to be charismatic species?
No, they are. Well, I am a, you know, I think they're visually attractive enough, and I think they're so important. Yeah, I have a book about attracting native pollen or butterflies, butterfly gardening book, and it's got a whole chapter. I and staff, by the way, it's a multi-author, and we've got a whole chapter on moth pollinators and how you attract them to your yard. We do talk about this. I know that we've had at least one webinar on the topic. We often bring this issue up whenever we're doing, garden work, that you can help the nighttime pollinators as well as the daytime pollinators. And when you think about it, there are 10 times as many moths as there are butterflies. So providing the resources is a real help to biodiversity. Um, the one interesting touch point that I would say with the lights as well is that there's new and emerging data that lights may affect daytime insects. There's a study out showing that monarch butterflies that might be hanging out in your yard move more if there's excessive light. Anytime an animal's moving when it doesn't need to move, it's burning up calories, so then it needs to visit more flowers, may not be able to, find a mate or whatever. So lights are a key, and we need more work on that. And as we do that, I think you're right that we should be talking about the wonderful pollinator gardens you can have and go out with your amber lamp at night and see what's visiting them. So great question. And we do have resources for moth. Uh, we have it in my book, and I believe other places, for how to help create a moth garden.
Thank you, Scott. I did share the link to the webinar. It was Emily May who did the nocturnal pollinators webinar. It's awesome. So I definitely suggest
Yeah.
checking it out if you haven't. Well, Scott, thank you so much for this presentation today. I know that it's hard to squeeze everything we've done in a year in that amount of time, but you did a wonderful job. And it's very inspiring. I feel fortunate to be a part of that. And I look forward to this next year. And thank you to our audience, for everyone who came. Thank you for our members, our donors, our volunteers, and staff who are here today. And we look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you so much, Amber, for being here as well and helping to host. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, incredible staff at Xerces, and thank you, all you supporters and people doing things. Appreciate you. Thank you.